this is Koba Sensei from ITeens Lab. This video is the 6th installment in our video course explaining how to use Unity, a software for creating 3D and 2D games. In the previous lesson, we used something called variables to write a script that controls the speed at which a ball moves. This time, we're going to use something called an if statement to create a program where the ball turns back midway. Now, this if statement is also something that's absolutely essential when it comes to programming. Once you learn how to use if statements, your programming skills will take a big step up. So, please, definitely give it a try. In this video, we'll be continuing from the file we used last time, so if you haven't watched part 4 or part 5 yet, please start from those. Alright, let's get started. This time, we're going to work with the if statement. We'll be using the same file as before. Okay, so here it is, the script, the move script. We're going to edit the contents of this script now. This part here, the commented out section we wrote last time, we won't be using it this time, so let's go ahead and delete it to clean things up. Alright, up to here. So, that was just some unnecessary code from last time. I've cleaned it up and organized things. Sorry about that. Now, as an additional note for this time, there was something I forgot to explain last time, declaring variables. It's about where to declare them. For example, like this float speed here. The place where you write that you're creating this variable. Basically, this. Let's declare it right after the class definition, right around here. So, not inside void start or void update, but around here instead. Technically, you can declare variables in various places, but when you're just starting out, it's safest to declare them around here. So, please remember to create your variables in this area for now. Alright, so that's it for the additional notes from last time. Now, for today, I'd like to go over something called the if statement. I'll write a bit here. Yes, this time it's Gifabun. Alright. So, if in English means in case or what if. Basically, when something happens or a certain condition is met, the program will execute a specific action. This is also called a conditional branch. Conditional branching, right. Basically, based on a certain condition, you decide whether to go with pattern A or pattern B, something like that. It can control the flow of the game, or determine how a character moves. It's used in all sorts of situations. The if statement is, after variables, one of the most fundamental things in programming, so make sure you learn it well. Honestly, you don't need to overthink the details. If you just keep practicing, you'll definitely get the hang of it. That's what I think. So, for those of you who have done programming with something like Scratch, you probably know about the if block, so I think you're already familiar with it. Alright, so this time, we're going to use this ball. Alright. In the previous videos, we made it so the ball would fly off with a whoosh, but this time, I want to make it so that when it reaches a certain point, it comes back. Sorry about that. The speed was a bit too fast, so I'll set it to about 0.3, or maybe 0.1. Yes, exactly, the speed was just too fast. I set the speed to 0.1 here. And also, since we'll be adjusting the speed value later, let's make it public. Right, when you declare a variable, if you don't write something like equals something, basically it gets created with a value like 0 or nothing. In the program here, the speed will be set to 0, but when you actually start the game, the 0.1 value you set in the inspector will be applied, and the speed will move at 0.1. It's moving pretty nicely and slowly, yeah. Alright then, let's get started. So here, you see translate, vector 3.forward* speed written here. Do you all remember this? The transform of the object this script is attached to. We're going to change its translate value. So, how are we going to change it? With vector 3.forward. In other words, in the forward direction, the z direction. That's the direction. So, we're going to transform, or translate, in the z direction. That's what this means. Right here, the transform will keep increasing in the z direction. That's how it works. Okay. And as for this speed, well, with each frame, this speed here, in my case, it's set to 0.1, so it increases by 0.1 for each frame. That's basically how it works. Alright, and what we're going to make now is, when I turn 30. it turns back. That's what I'd like to try now. Alright, so please watch for a moment. Alright, first is if. Then, parentheses, and then curly brackets. When you press enter at this point, it looks like this, and that's the whole sequence. Yes, so the key point here is that an if statement starts with if, then regular parentheses, and then these curly braces. That's the structure it uses. Yes. And inside these parentheses of the if, you'll write the condition. Then, inside these curly braces here, the condition. If the condition is met, you'll write what actions to take. Alright, let's give it a try. Yeah. You write it like this. Transform, right? Position.z. Okay, 30. So, what's written here is, well, transform.position.z. This part here. You see how the transform's position as x, y, and z. The z in the transform's position, this is it. It says here, if the z value is 30 or higher. That's what's written here. This is the conditional statement. Transform.position.z. The transform position z. If it becomes 30 or higher, then it will operate according to this condition here. That's how it works. And here's a quick tip. Alright, greater than, less than, and so on. We use terms like greater than or equal to and less than or equal to, but right here, there's a difference. I think there are quite a few people who don't really understand it, so I'd like to give a simple explanation. Let's open this up. Alright, so this means less than. And this means greater than. And this one means less than or equal to, and this one means greater than or equal to, right? Okay. For example, if we say less than 30, then 30 itself doesn't count. So, 29 or less is okay. And if we say greater than 30, then 30 doesn't count either, so 31 or more is okay. But if we say less than or equal to 30, then 30 is just barely okay. 30 is included and it's fine. And in the case of greater than or equal to 30, well, 30 is okay, and 31 and 32 are also okay. That's how it works. Right. So, please remember this. To put it simply, the side that's puffed out, this symbol that looks like a bent angle, the puffed out side is the greater side. And since there's an equal sign, in the case of or equal to, or if this side is greater, the puffed out side, then it's okay. That's the kind of conditional expression we're talking about. And this, inequality sign, make sure to remember this well. When you're doing programming, this is called a comparison operator. Okay. The terminology here is a bit difficult, so you don't really need to memorize it, but what I want you all to understand is this part. With this angled bracket, the side that opens wider is the greater side, and the side that's closed is the smaller side. So, the open side points to the larger value, and the closed side points to the smaller value. That's how you read it. Alright. In other words, here we're writing something like, what happens if transform.position.z exceeds 30, or becomes 30 or greater? That's the approach we're taking here. Alright. Since the explanation got a bit long, let me say it again. This if statement is used to set a condition, and if that condition is met, then some action will be taken. That's what it does. So, this if. The part inside the parentheses that I'm writing now is the condition. And this part here is what happens if the condition is met. So, for this example, the condition is, if transform.position.z becomes 30 or greater. That's the condition we set. Alright, let's give it a try. When the condition of being 30 or greater is met, we'll output a debug log. Okay, it has reached 30 or more. That's the message we'll display. I'd like to try this out now. Yes. Using transform, translate, will gradually increase the z value, and when z goes over 30, a debug log will display that it has reached 30 or more. This is the kind of program I wrote. Let's take a look. I'll display the console log for a moment. Okay, Now, let's run it. There it is. Yes, just like that. Let me try it one more time. When you play it, nothing shows up for a while, but once this goes over 30, it looks like this. Basically, it keeps showing that it has gone over 30, one after another. Alright. Sorry, just a quick note about the console log error. If you press this clear button, you can erase all the messages that have been displayed in the console. And as for clear on play here, well, when you hit play, it will clear all the previous messages that were displayed. Basically, this clear on play option. Make sure it's turned on. It's a little hard to tell, but if you click here, the color will disappear and it will be turned off. So please make sure to try it with clear on play turned on. Then, nothing will show up for a while. Right here. Yes, once it goes over 30, it will appear here. That's how it works now. Alright. This is the if statement here. So, what we're doing is displaying this message if transform.position.z exceeds 30. Alright, so right now, we're talking about transform.position.z, the z-coordinate. We refer to this as the z-coordinate, and when the z-coordinate goes over 30, a message saying it's now 30 or more will appear. So, it's at the same position as this command, right at the same spot as this command. So, you just need to write the command here to say, please do this. Alright, let's comment out the debug log for now. We'll let it rest for a bit, and I'd like to try writing a program that makes it turn back. There are a few ways to make it turn back, but the method I think is the simplest is to put a minus here. For example, you could enter something like minus 0.1 here. So, what is this actually doing? Alright, there's a variable called speed, basically, it's a container. Into this variable, we're going to put minus 0.1. That's what's happening here. Let me explain a bit. At the very beginning, when you declare a variable, so when you write public float speed, the initial value inside is 0. Right, so at this point, the newly created container has 0 inside. Then, when you run the game, at the very moment it starts, whatever value you set in the inspector, like 0.1, gets instantly put in. If you haven't set anything in the inspector, the game will proceed with the initial value you set. Right. So, in this case, we wrote speed equals -0.1f. What this means is, even though the speed variable, the container, currently has 0 inside, this command replaces the contents of that container with -0.1. That's what this instruction does. So that's why we write it this way. Please make sure to remember this. When you write the variable equals something, it means you're putting that value into the variable. This putting in isn't about adding, it means you're replacing it with -0.1. Alright, let's give this a try. Now, let's move forward. When it reaches 30, like this, it turns back. The speed has become -0.1. Let's watch it one more time. It starts at the beginning. Okay, the z value keeps increasing, and when it reaches 30, this is what happens. Yes, the speed becomes -0.1, and it starts moving in the opposite direction. Alright, so in the current state, it turns back at -0.1, but here's the point, this speed, specifically the value inside speeddef. At first, we set it to 0.1 in the inspector. Now, you can change it here to 0.1 or 0.2, but even though you went through the trouble of setting it to 0.1 in the inspector, having to manually rewrite it here is actually pretty annoying. So, that's why. There's a better way to write this. Yes, right. So this is a bit, well, if you think about it in terms of math, it might not make much sense, but in programming, this is how it works. you take the variable called speed and flip its sign. So you take whatever value is currently in the speed variable, right now it's 0.1, and you make it negative. It means you're putting it back into the same box again. With this, it should work. Let's give it a try. Alright, it moves forward at 0.1 and then comes back at minus 0.1. Now, let's see what happens if, for example, the speed is set to 2. That was really fast. It's a bit hard to see, but it's set to minus 2. So, as you can see, this is how you write it so that it moves in the opposite direction at the same speed it went forward. Basically, you just switch the sign to negative. Alright, so this time we used something called an if statement, and basically, when a certain condition is met, things switch or change, stuff like that. This if statement can be used for all sorts of things. In fact, when it comes to programming, not just games, you could say that if statements are absolutely essential, you use them all the time. For example, in games, you might use them to make the character dash when you press the B button, attack when you press the A button, or jump when you press another button. So, you'll end up using them a lot in situations like these. So, remember this conditional statement. If something happens, then do this. Branching based on conditions is important, so keep it in mind.
Alright, everyone, thank you for your hard work. How did you find today's content? Some of you might have thought it was a bit difficult. As I've mentioned several times, if statements are something you just can't avoid when programming. So, if you felt like you didn't really understand today's material, please try watching this video a few more times and review it. And don't worry, if you keep using it over and over, your body will naturally get used to it. So, just keep learning at this pace with these video lessons. Next time, we'll try making a program that deletes objects. Alright then, see you in the next video. Bye bye.